On all of the electronic devices that we have, iPhones, iPads, whatever piece of gadget that you have, there's this reset button. And it's incredibly valuable. Because sometimes when things go haywire, you press that reset button and everything normalizes again. What about our lives? Does our life have a reset button? Because I believe that we do. Because when you reset your life, it clears or deletes the past. It gets you out of an unsatisfying rut. It helps you to rediscover who you are and your plans and purpose. In fact, people who reset their lives, they reach their goals faster. They're far more strategic in the management of their lives. And they have this incredibly clear perspective, this focused priority, and they know their purpose. And that's what I love about the whole idea of resetting your life. And I want us to draw from this story of Nehemiah, chapter 1 and verse 1, to find out how Nehemiah reset his life. Verse 1. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men. And I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. When you read through the rest of this chapter and book, you find out that Nehemiah, he goes back home to Jerusalem under the direction of the king of Babylon, and he rebuilds the city, rebuilding the walls, rehanging the gates, and removing the disgrace and the trouble, the shame that the people had suffered, all because everything came to a head by this conversation. Anytime you want to learn about leadership from a biblical, spiritual perspective, read the book of Nehemiah. It's filled with principles on leadership. You just read through it, you'll find that Nehemiah has the incredible ability to galvanize people from the 5 sectors of society, to create a team, people from government and political sector, the economic and business sector, religious sector, and educational sector and family sector. He integrates those kinds of skill sets and builds a city. Fantastic, fantastic book that outlines a blueprint on bringing change to society and leadership. But for our time together today, I want us to go back to where Nehemiah is and sit next to this cupbearer, because that's what he says he was. You know what a cupbearer's job was? Cupbearer's job was to sip the wine before the king sipped it. Not from the same glass or flask. He'd take the pitcher, have a towel draped over his left hand. He'd have to pour some of the wine on his wrist, sip it. If it was poisoned, he'd die, and the king would know, don't drink that wine. How would you like that kind of a job? And you're talking about your job as hazardous. Every time the king is thirsty, the cupbearer is saying, oh, this might be the day. I just want you to see the kind of pressure this man's facing. And now the Bible is very specific in that. Where were these guys? They were in the citadel or the palace at Susa. Susa is the location of the southwestern part of Iran today. It was the winter palace of the king. Because in summertime, that part of the world got so incredibly hot that there's no way the king would be there. So he would only come when it's winter time. And so he had this palace all fitted out, all decorated with all the tapestry and the artistic flair to show that he's king. And the king of Babylon at that time was the most significant figurehead in the world, because Babylon was the strongest nation in the world at that time. And here's Nehemiah. He's in the servants' quarters. He's entertaining some guests that came from abroad, from his homeland. They laugh, they joke, they reconnect. Then they get down to serious conversation. Nehemiah poses this question: how are the people back home? How is Jerusalem? The response: the people are in trouble. The physical state, they're lacking. And they're in disgrace, shame, their emotional state. Why? Because Jerusalem had been ravaged before, and 140 years ago, in fact, and the country was just demolished, and Jerusalem, the city, was demolished, and because of Babylon. And then even more than a decade ago, there was this effort to rebuild the walls under the leadership of Ezra, and the neighbors protested, and the king came and squashed the whole effort. And so Nehemiah got wind of this now, and so he finds out that there's trouble and disgrace and shame and poverty and all of this stuff going on at home. And here's Nehemiah in this paradise. It's like people that they live in New Jersey, but because they have money, when it's wintertime, they fly south to Florida, and then they have the gall to come back to New Jersey during summer because it's too hot in Florida. Don't you hate them? And here they are. They come back up, and so this is what this citadel at Susa was like. And Nehemiah's there as the official cupbearer of the king, and it's a great place. He's on respite, holiday. And he gets this news. And it so troubled him that the scripture says he sat down and wept and mourned and fasted before God. And first thing that happened, because something took place inside of him that reset his life. Life was not going to be the same any longer. It was so disconcerting and so uplifting in terms of upheaval, rather, that Nehemiah knew everything is going to be different now. He reset his life. The first thing he did was reset his perspective.